All right, good morning, everyone. It's just after 9. I'll reconvene the adjourned meeting from yesterday. This is the Planning and Environment Committee for the one remaining item 6. Welcome, everyone. So we'll begin with questions in respect of the report. I'll start because not with questions, but with just some comment about process, please. I do want to make sure we discuss the report and not wider issues of urban design or anything else. And so if people stray onto matters that aren't specific to the report that we asked for, then I'll be ruling them out of order. And I think I'd appreciate your assistance in that regard. So can we start with any questions that people might have for Dr. Bidrose in the first instance about the report that we asked for, which was furnished and is the subject of item 6. Any questions? Councillor Walker.
Yep, Marina, good morning. Thanks for the report. I have a question around item 21, please. Talks about examples of what other New Zealand cities have initiated. I'm just interested if there's any feedback from Auckland about what they have implemented and how they feel about it.
You mean in terms of the temporary improvements?
Exactly.
Thank you.
You have to give Radic the opportunity to sit back. You can't be part
well,
of
it.
You need to just take a pause and you need to give Radic that opportunity.
All right. Can we just adjourn for 30 seconds, please? Can I have a seconder? I have a seconder from Councillor Walker. The meeting is adjourned.
You can't go into question time until you've dealt with the adjourn the meeting to give Councillor Radic an opportunity to take advice, and I think it would be appropriate to hear from Councillor Radic on where that situation is now at, and that would be what I would suggest we do next.
Well, that's fine. He's on the screen, or was on the screen. His opportunity to indicate he wants to talk, but I cannot see him at the moment.
He is indicating he wishes
to talk. Oh, there he is. Right. Councillor Radic.
Unmuted? Yes. Can you hear me?
Can you speak up, please? It's quite soft.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's clear. Very good. Because the muting has come and gone quite a bit. So the application to the Office of the Auditor General was filed last night, and they have, the Office of the Auditor General indicated that they could commit to having a reply by Tuesday. So I have no expectation of getting, or given that happened, very late last night, so about 10 o'clock. So it looks exceedingly unlikely that I will get a reply from them this morning, since they have to consider it and prepare it. So so the question is whether I should try and stall the meeting till Tuesday, or go ahead having it this morning. And I know there's considerable inconvenience to councillors to be here this morning, and I do appreciate that. So I thought the best thing to do would be throw it to the meeting. We want to just go ahead this morning, and a show of hands would do for me. I do not want to inconvenience my colleagues any further. And to let the meeting decide, well, should we go ahead and just dispense with the business now, or wait till Tuesday until I get my report from the OAG? What do you what do you think about that, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'd like to do this formally. Are you moving that we continue with item 6 now?
No, I'll move that we delay proceedings until Tuesday at 9 o'clock.
Okay. So there's a motion on the floor that we delay this matter further until Tuesday at 9 a.m.
Your Worship, the Chair, I'm sorry, I think that motion needs to be clarified, because the officers advised the councillor that they will get him the advice by Tuesday. The earliest we could reconvene would be Wednesday on that basis, because I wouldn't anticipate that it's going to be early on Tuesday. So I would suggest the resolution should say Wednesday.
Okay, so I'll change that to Wednesday at 9 o'clock then.
All right, that's it. While you're there, Ms. Graham or Mr. Garbutt, is there any useful comment you can make about the how unequivocal the reply was from, equivocal or not, the reply was from the OAG about the timing of the turnaround on this? We can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear us? Can you hear us? No.
Maybe.
Oh.
Try again.
We'll try again now.
That's better.
Solicitors for Councillor Raddick has indicated that the Office of Auditor General has indicated they will use their best endeavours to get a decision by Tuesday on his application that was filed last night, exactly as he says. So I agree with Ms. Graham. If a decision comes through on Tuesday, you really won't know the answer and be able to meet again till Wednesday.
All right. So the commitment from the Office of the Auditor General is that best endeavours to have an answer by Tuesday. Thank you. All right. There's a motion on the floor that we adjourn this item further until Wednesday next at 9 a.m. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Hall. Now, Councillor Raddick, do you want to speak to this further?
Not really. I think everyone is pretty well. I'll speak briefly. Everyone is, well aware of what's at stake here. But these things, just as Mayor Hawkins signalled yesterday, these things could drag on forever. And we did have this first deadline, as mentioned by my solicitor. So I would hate to see a second deadline missed. However, I mean, obviously, I would like to speak to the item number 6 and the whole COVID response. And I do feel that, the various parties in the town would like to be, like to have a representation in the form of me at that, in that discussion. Anyway, it's. I just sooner go with the will of the colleagues. I've already feel, bad that I've inconvenienced Councillor Staines, Councillor Lord and others. I think I will go with the will of my colleagues. Simple as that.
Thank you. Councillor Staines.
For me, it would be preferable if we could adjourn till 1 a.m. in the afternoon. Would that be possible, Councillor Raddick?
No, I'm advised that there's a clash. No, it's not possible.
They've said Tuesday.
So I'm out again. Thank you.
Councillor van der Vis.
I don't believe that further delay is appropriate. I think that councillors have been quite fair in giving the first requested amount of delay to give Councillor Raddick an opportunity for his lawyers to come back with a statement today. Nothing has come back that's conclusive. I don't believe it's in the public interest to delay this any longer. I note that Councillor Staines misled Council yesterday, saying it was not possible for him to attend today. I understand it may have been difficult, but I believe that this was misrepresented, as is proven today. I don't want to see other delays for this. I think we should simply proceed today and get
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order.
The accusation of misleading the meeting is a significant one, and I would like a ruling from you as to whether you believe Councillor Staines did in fact mislead the meeting as has been alleged.
I would certainly uphold the point of order. I think the accusation is unnecessary and unfair, and I'd ask Councillor van der Vos to withdraw the comment and apologise.
Mr. Chair, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Gary, I didn't catch what you said.
We couldn't hear you. You're quite distorted at times.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I think the comment was unnecessary and unfair and inaccurate, and I'd ask I uphold the point of order, and I'd ask Councillor van der Vos to apologise, to withdraw the comment and apologise.
Councillor Staines is on record yesterday as saying it was not possible.
Councillor, it's not a matter for debate. I've ruled and I'm asking you to withdraw and apologise.
I'm not going to withdraw a fact that is provable in the public record. He said yesterday it was not possible for him to attend today, and here he is. Therefore, the council was misled yesterday, and he said it twice.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councillor Gary.
Once the chair has ruled, that's it, and the member continues to debate the point.
That's correct, Councillor van der Vos. I really don't want to do this, but I'm going to ask you again to withdraw and apologise. If you don't do that, then you will no longer be part of the meeting.
You are ultra-virus. I am not apologising for a provable fact. You, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Staines. Councillor Staines.
I don't need to have an apology. I did make that statement yesterday, but I think it's important to put on record that I have gone out of my way today to rearrange what was a very difficult day in order to be here for this meeting. So I don't think I need an apology, because I did say I couldn't make it yesterday, but having worked hard on trying to shuffle everything around my house move, I've managed to get here. So it's up to you.
Thank you, Councillor van der Vos, for the third time. Let's forget the apology. That's very gracious of you, Councillor Staines. I'd ask you to withdraw the comment, please, that the councillor misled the council.
I will not withdraw a provably true comment.
All right, then you leave me no choice, Councillor, but to remove you from the meeting.
You are doing that illegally. It is illegal for you, Councillor Benson Pope, to exclude me from this meeting for saying something that is provably true. You, sir, are usurping your role as chair. You,
I move that we adjourn for 5 minutes. Do I have a seconder, please?
Second.
Mayor Hawkins, thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned until 9:23. All right, the meeting is reconvened. Can everyone hear me? Can you just indicate that the audio is okay? Councillor Vandervis, I've taken further advice, councillors, and Councillor Vandervis. The issue is really with the strength of the suggestion that Councillor Staines misled the meeting. It's certainly the case that he made the statement you're talking about yesterday, but it's also true that he's had to make considerable changes in his arrangements to be able to be part of the meeting today. So if he doesn't require an apology, which I think is very generous of him. So Councillor Vandervis, I'd like you to withdraw the statement or the suggestion that Councillor Staines deliberately misled the meeting. And if you're prepared to do that, I think that's a satisfactory compromise. We can continue with the meeting.
I never said, Councillor Benson Pope, that Councillor Staines deliberately misled the meeting.
You did say he misled the meeting, though.
I did, and that is a fact.
Well, I'm still asking you to withdraw that because I think that suggests he did it deliberately and he clearly didn't, as he has told us. I'm trying to find an elegant way of compromise so that I don't have...
Ask him to choose another word, not misled.
Right, would you choose a word other than misled, please? Told the meeting that he couldn't get their praise. Misled is very strong and the advice I have is that if you continue to contest this, then I have no choice but to exclude you from the meeting, and I don't want to do that.
I'm quite happy to change the statement to say that Councillor Staines told the meeting that it was not possible for him to attend today. That's also true.
That's certainly true. Thank you very much. Right, now, the next speaker is Councillor Walker.
Sorry, the quick question was so long ago, I think I've forgotten what it was. Let me, okay, yeah, what I want to say is in terms of Councillor Radich's request, my position has not changed from my position yesterday. And I think along with the Mayor, I was the only other one. I think my words were, we have in great danger of prolonging this process in a legal quagmire. I don't think that has changed. And I don't feel confident that even Wednesday, we might resolve this. I think it could continue and continue. So I haven't changed my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My position hasn't changed either. I consider what's at stake here is public health and the public good. And that's what we need to focus on, not on one person's situation. It's around what we all do for the public good.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elder.
I actually think that we should uphold the process of democracy and the right for people to be involved. But at the same time, right now, I believe, for me at least, voting today would help the people of Dunedin. So I'm in a difficult position right now. I do believe we need to be ethical and uphold the principles of democracy, and but at the same time we've got to look after our people, and so I think I'll abstain on this one.
Councillor O'Malley.
Well, my position hasn't changed either, which was we needed to pursue natural justice, but I will vote no on this because I believe we did our job by waiting till this morning. I believe that the interpretation was always going to be a narrow one, and I'm a little disappointed that Councillor Radich wanted us to wait longer because of the very much an outside chance this was even going to go in any other direction than it is right now. I believe we observed the role we needed to observe to make sure that people had a chance to be involved, but time does not permit us to wait any longer. So I'll be voting no.
Councillor Barker.
My position is like Councillor Elders, that I do believe in natural justice, but I also believe in getting through this COVID-19 response. So I'll be voting no.
Any further speakers? Councillor Wiley.
I do believe we need to follow this through and see where this goes in relation to the Attorney General's office. I think there is a process that we have started down, and I think it's our duty to follow that process through. I think to say, okay, we gave them 12 hours. The Attorney General's office said they can't process this until Tuesday. Well, we all accepted that we were prepared to wait for the Attorney General's informational feedback for 12 hours. I don't see where the critical issue is here in allowing this process to follow its natural course through and actually get a real answer on this. I still am struggling with the fact of what this motion is going to be about, because we have two motions in front of us. And I think there is a totally different opinion on what those two motions will deal with. But in this instance, I am going to vote yes and support Councillor Radich and his extension, because I think that is the natural course of the process of this debate.
Thank you. Further speakers? There appear to be none. Councillor Radich, right of reply?
Yes, thank you. It's good to have a cross-section of opinion, and you know, it's tough to put this on my colleagues, but the thing is, I feel that it's worthy of waiting for Wednesday because of this ruling from the OAG, which has significance for all of us and further significance beyond this meeting. And you know, naturally, it'd be my preference to wait. However, I will go with the will of my colleagues, as I've stated.
Thank you. Well, I'll put this by division. The motion that we're voting on is that we delay this item, we adjourn further until Wednesday next at 9 a.m. to discuss item 6. Division, please. GSOs?
Councillor Barker?
No.
Councillor Elder?
Abstain.
Councillor Gary?
No.
Councillor Hall?
Yes.
Mayor Hawkins?
No.
Councillor Houlihan?
Yes.
Councillor Fiso?
No.
Councillor Lord? Councillor Lord? He's muted himself. I'll carry on, we'll get Councillor Lord. Councillor O'Malley?
No.
Councillor Raddick? Councillor Staines?
No.
Councillor Vandervis?
No.
Councillor Walker?
No.
Councillor Wiley?
Yes.
Councillor Lord?
No.
Councillor Benson Pope?
No.
Motion lost 10-4 with 1 abstention.
Thank you. We'll now move to the paper itself, and I'll invite questions from councillors of the Chief Executive. Can I repeat the comment I made yesterday and earlier today, that I really would appreciate it if people would focus on this paper, a report that was commissioned because we asked for it. All but one councillor made this request, and the Chief Executive has delivered it. So please, can we stay focused? Mayor Hawkins, you're first.
Not so much a question, just seeking some clarity around, as a result of that motion, is Councillor Raddick sitting back or withdrawing from this item or not?
I'm waiting to hear from him.
So as a result of that, I need to sit back from this item.
That's fine, thank you.
I reserve the right, if my response from the OAG should miraculously arrive, I'll present it to the meeting.
So you are withdrawing. Thank you, councillor. Thank you, councillor. Thank you, Mayor Hawkins. Then the first question is from councillor Walker.
Yeah, hi. It's the same question from half an hour ago. Do I need to repeat it for the Chief Executive, or can she recall the question? It's around item 21, seeking possible feedback from the similar trial that's taken place in Auckland?
No, I don't have that. Sorry, I wasn't aware of that question, and I don't have that feedback from Auckland. I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay, just item 21 of the paper alludes to the fact that examples of other cities in New Zealand have implemented the sort of measures we're discussing. I was just wondering if there was any feedback from that particular trial.
No, well, of course, everybody's implementing this for COVID level 2. So at the very longest, this might have been in place somewhere for 12 hours. So no, we don't have any feedback. I mean, this is the key point of this is to try and provide public distancing space for alert level 2, which only began yesterday. So no, there is no such there's no such feedback available as far as I'm aware.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Bidrose, I wonder if you could comment on if the council was to decide on implementing some of these measures at this meeting this morning. What is our current situation in terms of delivering measures? And of course, it depends on if we took perhaps the mayor's motion, for example.
Yeah, that's obviously as a result of yesterday. Mr. Drew's team went away and had a look at refined timeline. It is still planning to start yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock versus planning to start this morning at 11. It will be challenging, and there will be parts that won't be able to be in place by tomorrow, although we can have some people working later tonight potentially if we're able to arrange that at short notice, but that's harder than it sounds. There are, as I said yesterday, 70 or so speed signs to go up. We would look to put up instead of putting up the sort of more professional looking speed signs, we'd look to put up just temporary ones so that we could get them around. What you want is to have it in place by Saturday morning, which is when we want people to start to return to the CBD for shopping and hospitality. The decals on the footpath were in the first instance going to be on the roadway, so to remind drivers that they're entering a qualitatively different part of our roading network and needed to behave differently, and that's really a key issue here for public safety. We can do that by painting them on the road, and obviously we don't want to be putting wet paint on the road while we're trying to encourage people to walk on the road, so there may be only partially done. And we'll work through that this afternoon, but the idea would be to have it partially done throughout the main street rather than have only part of the street done. So have less of it, but to blanket the area so that we are doing what we can to encourage.
So just to clarify, staff would be working through the night or into the night?
Some might well be working into the night now. So
thank you.
Dr. Bidrose, just a question from me. When we gave you this generic request to look at what might be done to achieve a safer central city with extra people and just distancing and so on, were staff given a completely open carte blanche invitation, or were there some things that were not on the table as possibilities?
Yeah, that's a fair question. No, they weren't given a completely open carte blanche for two reasons. One was that we only had a week to come up with the ideas for the team to work out how to implement and to write a report to get to you to say what could look like a cohesive package. And so some things were specifically by me said to be off the table. The first of those was planter boxes. My concern was that this would be seen as pedestrianisation by stealth, that people would say this was a lunatic extension of the Octagon trial and other such kind of emotive terms. In fact, this has got nothing to do with either pedestrianisation or an extension of the Octagon trial. It is to encourage people back down for the COVID level 2 by providing enough room for people to do appropriate social distancing, which at the moment remains at 2 metres from strangers. So no planter boxes, no, it's not an urban design thing. We're not trying to make it look pretty for urban design reasons like we were in the Octagon. And the second instruction I gave was that there was to be no withdrawal of any car parking. Withdrawing car parking in Dunedin is akin to telling the Egyptians to sacrifice their newborn children. It is highly contentious. And with good reason, retailers are worried. Many retailers feel that a car park outside their shop is the thing that makes it successful, and other people don't think that's true. I did not want this to be mired down in a debate about the impact of losing 30 car parks. I mean, one option would have been simply to withdraw all the car parking and have people walk in that strip along the side of the road that's currently car parks, P5s and bus stops. That's not that simple anyway, because you still need disability drop-off points, you still need drop-off for courier vans and so on, and for deliveries. And so the easiest thing, so that meant that that solution wasn't as wholesale possible, which did leave you again towards the everybody walks on the roadway, and the roadway becomes a shared space. And so given that that was what we were going to have to look at, there was an instruction therefore not to take away any car parks, and so ramps up and down for people with disabilities and so on, which need to be many and frequent, it will go in the bus stop areas and places like that, but no car parks to be taken away. So they were the two conditions which we felt would meet the needs of a number of people who had concerns about both of those two things.
Thank you. Councillor Van der Merwe.
What has the cost been of the more than 70 10-kilometre reduced speed signs?
I think the costs are in the report, Councillor. I'm sorry. I think it's approximate, Mr. Drew, just for the courting signs and things.
The 70 signs, it's $150 a change per sign, so it's about $10,000 to change the signs. And it's important that we change the signs because ambulance and emergency vehicles can exceed the speed limit of permanent signs, but they can't exceed the speed limit of temporary signs. So we can't put up a whole lot of temporary signs because it'll impact on our emergency services.
So we have had those signs made, but we know that, I mean, that they don't go off. So they will sit in our warehouse. If this trial doesn't go ahead, they'll sit in our warehouse and they will be used for roadworks and other things over time. So it's not wasted money if that's your concern.
It is my concern, and my other concern is that under what authority do you spend over $10,000 on signage that council has yet to vote for? I don't believe that 10-kilometre signs are something that you're going to be using in roadworks.
So council don't vote for me to make signs or otherwise. I have an operational spend, knowing this meeting was yesterday, but now today, if we're to put this in place by Saturday, the signs had to be made. It was a request from the council that we do the work and obviously to implement it in time for people to return to town safely, because I don't think we want people to be run over. We had to start procuring some of this. We are comfortable that there are other uses for 10K signs and they will be used in time.
Can you please forward to me a list of the uses for 10-kilometre signs in the future by email? Thank you.
You mean as we use one over the next few years?
No, as you may ever use them. I would like to know where you will ever use a 10-kilometre sign of this type.
I don't know if that information exists, but I'll have a look.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
It's possibly just a question to the chair at the moment. Are we going to be able to question any other staff, or are we just questioning the CEO?
You can question anyone who's on screen or available is available for you to ask a question, Councillor.
Oh, well, I'll just wait because you prefaced this by saying any questions for the CEO. So
I'm sorry. I meant staff.
Oh, I'll step back for a second if you don't mind, then wait for other questions and step back in.
That's fine. Councillor Houlihan.
Mr. Christie's not online, but he's available if any of you have questions for Mr. Christie. I can just get him from his office.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of questions. Is this like a prerequisite? Is it a legal thing, you know, that the government said we have to do?
No, there's no legal requirement for us to provide for social distancing outside. There is inside.
Okay, no, that's fine. And I'm just trying to work out if the cars are parked there. So does that mean people have to go from the footpath and then walk around the cars and then onto the road? Or how does that work?
There's numerous spaces all along the street where there is no car parking. So numerous, there's the old bus stops where there are not car parking. There's the current pedestrian crossings. So any space where there isn't a car parked. And that is most of George Street. I think there's about 30 car parks. The rest of George Street, that's George Street. I don't know the number in Princes.
Okay, and so if I had a concern, I don't know whether it was considered or not, that if there's signs and things all over the footpath, that it might actually slow people down. And I know when I'm out walking, I just walk fast and put my head down and go. At the moment, obviously, that was my concern, that if there's obstruction on the footpath, because we've said that businesses, could put things there, that could be an issue. And it also creates possibly an issue for disabled people. If we looked at that.
Yeah, so the plan is to make the roadway an accessible space. So everything will be travelling at walking distance on the roadway. So for people in wheelchairs and so on, you need to make sure that you can get up and down, women with prams, families with men with prams, families with little children. I think we have not looked at making shops take away their signage that they put on the footpath. I don't think that would go down too well with retailers. Some of the cafes are have very close spaces, so it's the two things that you're likely to see on the footpath for cafes is an increased use of cafe tables, so that cafes can have a larger number of tables than they might have inside their cafe and still have appropriate social distancing. For retailers, I don't imagine we're going to see much in the way of merchandise on the footpath. It's more likely to be queuing space, particularly for smaller retailers.
Has there been any community transmission that people have caught from walking along the street that we know of?
No idea.
Right, thank you.
Mayor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is around the amendment that was moved to the motion in the council meeting last Monday, surveying affected parties or businesses in the city centre in the window that we had available to run such a survey, and was just interested to know if we had any feedback from that survey work.
This is from the survey that asked the retailers whether or not they supported the idea.
Yeah, not the initial one from Mr. Christie in the general sense, but the more targeted one around these proposals that was done subsequently.
Yes, so I sent that around, emailed that to councillors yesterday. The survey was sent out to 245 businesses, both by us and the Chamber. So trying to identify everybody where we had an email address for a business on or around George Street and Princes Street. There was a roughly 20% response rate, which is pretty standard for a survey. And I think it was a simple survey. Do you broadly agree or not agree with the proposal? There was a brief description of the proposal that allowed speeds of 10k on the road, making the roadway a space that's shared between cars, walkers, scooters, mobility scooters, etc. That there would be no removal of parking. Potentially, I would not remove or alter any car parks on the main street. And it potentially would allow businesses and cafes extra room on the footpath. It would be fair to say that the results were pretty much split 50-50. So on the question, do you broadly agree or not agree, roughly half gave it a 1 or a 2, yes they agreed, and roughly half gave it a 4 or 5 and said they roughly didn't agree. I mean, there were 44 responses, 22 broadly agreed and 17 broadly disagreed. And to the question, do you think it will or will not help bring people back to the CBD, 18 said they thought it would help and 18 said they thought it wouldn't help. When you break that down by business type, hospitality and cafe owners compared to building owners, so people who run hospitality and cafes, the results were roughly similar. There wasn't a big divergence between those two groups. The only change is if you break down so that you are just looking at hospitality and businesses in George Street and Princes Street, the Octagon, compared to businesses in another part of town. And the businesses in George Street, Princes Street and the Octagon were more likely to be supportive than businesses in other parts of town who are less likely to be supportive. But the numbers are not huge, as I say, 44 responses. It was the survey went out just after we completed the report and put it online so we could show the business owners who cared to read the report as well as the survey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stones.
My question was answered, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor van der Vis.
On the advantages side of the recommendation for option 1, this is on page 36 of our agenda, it gives us an advantage to provide more options for businesses to trade. Is the option being spoken about there the ability to extend out into the pavement?
Yes, principally that, I mean, the most obvious one there is for cafes. So cafes like the Good Oil, for example, where the tables are close together, could potentially put more tables out onto the footpath. For the others, it's only, I mean, some may choose to put racks of clothing out on the footpath, some do now, but may want to do that. It's more likely, I would anticipate, and retailers will make their own call that it might assist them make queuing arrangements. You probably saw the photo in this morning's paper of people queuing to go to the barbers, for example, and that takes up some of the footpath space.
How many George Street businesses have actually requested extra space moving out onto the pavement?
Well, we haven't been asked because they only opened yesterday. I mean, most of the businesses were closed. That was part of the difficulty with doing the consultation in this relatively short space of time, is that most of the businesses were closed, so we haven't actually been asked.
But prior to yesterday, have there been any George Street businesses? Obviously, the jewellers don't want to move out into the pavement. Have there been any businesses directly approaching the DCC during the last month or so asking to extend into the pavement?
Well, at the moment, of course, the jewellers haven't had to have people queuing up outside their shop, so perhaps it's not surprising that they haven't needed footpath space for that to happen. The only guide, I guess, would be the businesses that have already got licenses to have cafes, and to have tables for cafes on the pavement, and you do see those dotted around town. I don't have the numbers, but again, the physical distancing requirements of level 2 provide a different thing, if you like. However, even if none of those businesses do take that option up, it's an option. Even if none of them take that up, for pedestrians walking and crossing each other on the footpath, particularly, you will have seen the pedestrian counts that came through to you. So in that Golden Centre block of town, the counts, you're talking 100,000 people a week. I mean, that's a lot of people and a lot of foot traffic, and it is pretty much guaranteed that if you want the city to be busy, you will not have 2 metre physical distancing if all of those people have to walk on the footpath.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I have a series of questions, and I'll follow on from what Councillor van der Vis just asked about. And when we look at the recommendations, or the, sorry, just find the page, we look at page 36. It talks about recommendation options and advantages, and I'm trying to work out supports businesses they return to trade. Can I have a bit more explanation on that, please?
So there's a couple of things I just need to say. I mean, this report is produced in a week, in lockdown, where our people aren't able to meet, and yet that may be amusing, Councillor van der Vis, but it is real. It has been a very difficult report to pull together in a short space of time and get all the necessary people together to have discussions about. The main focus is, can you do anything and can you do it safely? That work and what you could do and how we could operationalise it basically took until Sunday, and then the report got pulled together. Up until then, it was very much a high line. So I mean, it's fair to say all of our reporting through this lockdown period has not been what you would normally expect. So I can't put my hand on my heart and say every single one of these absolutely there's evidence behind them or anything, because there's not. I mean, we are in the same position as you. Some staff think this is a great idea and some worry about it, you know. So I couldn't swear that I can prove any of these advantages and disadvantages. They're a bit of a brainstorm, and you've got your own common sense around those as well. That's all I can say. Okay. So the advantages, the point of this is to try and encourage people to come back to town, to support people to feel safe, being able to come in and go shopping and go to cafes. And like everyone else, There's a divergence of opinion about whether it will help. Some people think it really might, some people think it really might not.
Okay, and then further down in option 2, when we look at the advantages and disadvantages, it says, it says DCC is not actively encouraging and enabling people to engage with local businesses. If we stay with status quo.
Yeah, so that means that if we don't do anything, we're not sending a huge message out, which we would have to do. I mean, you know, we've had these ongoing advertising in the Otago Daily Times and through social media to say, this is what we're doing to try and be open for business. So it wouldn't be engaging in that same way. If we didn't do this, we'd be saying, use the footpath and keep your fingers crossed.
Can you, Kate, sorry, can you say that again?
So if we don't do anything, it's a missed opportunity to go out to people and say, here is our thing we are doing to try and support local businesses. I think that's all that sentence is intended to mean. Is that fair, Simon?
Keep your fingers crossed as you
well, about being able to have enough room to do social distancing.
Okay, so then I'll go back to Councillor Houlihan's question, was about how many people have basically being contacted with COVID-19 by walking down a footpath. And from what I've seen in the data, it shows that basically there has been no transmissions that can be identified in that way, and community transmissions that are unidentified have come out at 6%, but 1% basically they cannot trace.
I mean, it's fair to say that the reason that we've all been in lockdown is the disease is highly transmissible, and if nobody could catch it by being in a footpath or going shopping, then one would assume that the government would have not had level 4 and we would have been all able to walk on the footpath and go shopping. The reason that's been curtailed is that there is perceived by the public health agencies, who are supportive of this move for what it's worth, of this kind of action, that the social distancing is a requirement to reduce the possibilities of transmission. And the plans for level 2 also include plans for moving back up to level 3 and back up to level 4 when there is community transmission. I think it's expected that there will be pockets of transmission will pop up because people aren't able to maintain the social distancing, and there will be transmission. So none of us have a crystal ball.
I can understand that, but in all the research that I've gone through and looked at, and my wife has been quite thorough in this, being a ex-theatre nurse, there is no evidence of getting it in an open air environment.
Point of order, please, Mr. Chair.
Councillor, questions, please. A lot of people waiting.
Okay,
Do you have another question?
Well, okay, I'll continue my questions. Then I go to page 51, and there's signage showing keep 1 metre apart, and which was going to be placed on footpaths, but yet we see 1 metre.
Yeah, it needs to be 2 metres out of doors. So when this was written, we were still we didn't have the detailed alert level 2 guidelines, so that will have to say 2 metres.
Okay, and then on page 50 we have the image of what a streetscape should look like, and that's been used. And so to the top of the page, number 2, recommended spatial dimensions of physical distancing. Is that the type of implementation that we would be looking at for George Street?
Just to clarify, that's NZTA guidance. That's not what staff are putting in the recommendation.
Okay, so where NZTA have said that 30k is the right speed for that is not relevant.
No, because clearly 30k isn't the right speed. If you've got people walking on the road, it would be incredibly dangerous.
Okay.
So that's not for a shared walking space.
Okay, following up yesterday when Generation Zero was speaking, they talked about the whole funding of this project and where the money was coming from. And bear with me, it is all my screens here, the Innovating Streets COVID-19 project or program, that it says that these projects are being meant to fund projects that are going through to permanency.
Yeah, so I don't know if we'll get funding for what we're planning here because we have no intention of this being a permanent state of affairs. So, so at this point in time, we are spending our money, for example, to make the signs. There's no intention to make it a permanent shared space. So that may or may not inhibit our chance of getting, I mean, we'll apply, but it may or may not inhibit our chance of actually getting the money funded primarily by government, because we certainly won't be saying we have a plan to make this permanent.
So in the application, it will clearly state that this is not for a permanent integration.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
So then everywhere we're sort of reading through this document, we're reading that 90% funding from NZTA.
Well, I don't think we're reading that everywhere. If we get the funding, if we get the funding, then it's 90% paid for by NZTA. But I don't know what our being clear that it is not. This is not a permanent change. I don't know what impact that will have on our chance to get the funding. The cost is relatively modest, at the modest end of the scale, unless we come back to you about the idea of building permanent speed humps and things like that, and they are expensive. And you would do that if you expected level 2 to last for quite some time. But they also wouldn't be permanent. That would not be a permanent feature for us for George Street and Princess Street.
Okay. In normal times or normal process with a document like this, we would see feedback from police, fire, St John's, for example. I note there's no mention, anything from the emergency services, of them, one being spoken to their feedback, their thoughts. So I'm sorry, do we have any response of what they are thinking?
No, we haven't. We've only spoken to, as far as I'm aware, only spoken to the police. The police are comfortable with the proposal in their discussion. At any point in time, if they're coming into an emergency in town, because it's the one main street through, the side streets, they still travel at normal speed, then any potential hold up is minor. Speeds on George Street are not that fast anyway. I mean, nobody really does, George Street in particular, go through at, it's 30k currently. So a reduction is a very minor loss in time in terms of a response time.
Okay, I'm just about finished, thank you. The question about the survey, that was a key part of the discussion on Monday the 4th. When did the survey actually go out? I just want clarification on this.
Sorry, the survey, so we had a discussion on Monday the 4th. The staff spent the week determining what was doable. Obviously, we couldn't survey until we had a rough idea of what the plan was to do. So there's not much point surveying about something when you've got no idea what it is. That took a week. By Sunday, we were writing the paper, and when we had a paper we could show the retailers, which was on Monday, the survey went out then.
Okay, because I just understood from the ODT at Mayor Hawkins stated in Wednesday morning's paper that the survey went out Tuesday night.
It either went out Monday night or Tuesday night, I don't know which. There was a 24-hour turnaround because then we had to write the survey, of course.
Okay, so, okay, I would have thought the retailers would have been active trying to get their businesses together at that point, but okay, thank you. The have we had any feedback from the...
Hang on. There's an implication there that we've done something improper. I don't know if you think there would have been a better time to send it out. I mean, the questions sort of suggest we haven't done a good job. I think the team have done an extraordinary job pulling this together in this space of time and pulling together a list of all the businesses, which was a collaborative effort between us and the Chamber of Commerce, and writing the survey and getting the survey out and getting the survey analysed and getting the survey to you, all since the report got finished on Monday. So frankly, I struggle to see they could have done that any better. And I do rather resent the implication that they were being a bit slack about this, to be honest.
Well, I'm not going to debate this with you, and I'll be happy to take this offline and have a discussion with that. And I would agree the staff have done a great job. I guess the key most part of the question I have was when this motion and how I supported this motion from the beginning was the fact that the survey was a critical part of it. And
so we had a 20% response rate to the survey. 44 people out of the 245 we emailed. The other survey that we sent out, where we said to 2,769 businesses, tell us if you've got any great ideas for how to return to town, which was done the week earlier. That had 47 responses out of 2,769. So I think the response rate is about 10 times greater. So I suspect that retailers did take the time to respond. 20% is pretty standard for an unsolicited survey.
Okay, thank you. And I take it that, and I don't see.
Councillor, this is your last question. We can come back to you, but a lot of other people are waiting, and you've had about 20 questions. Sounds like a quiz show. Carry on.
Well, I'm just trying to get clarity on the number of items here.
Ask a question, please. Last one.
Do we have any data that shows that shoppers are concerned about travelling to the CBD or to shopping districts?
Only anecdotal.
Thank you. Councillor Hurlhan.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check on page 36? It says for option one of the disadvantages is that of the option one, if it went ahead, is that there'll be less room on footpaths and it'll be more difficult to maintain business, sorry, the dog's barking, business, pedestrian access and safety balance.
Yeah, so if you do have more under option one, if a number of cafes do take up the opportunity to put out tables, for example, that does reduce the space on the footpath. And if we do have rather a large amount of queuing outside shops to come in, like we did outside the barbers, that also does take up room on the footpath. So that, in one sense, encouraging that reduces the remaining footpath width, which is why you then end up having to go into the potential for sharing the roadway. When
yes, but
that's the options to vote for. You could vote for some things but not others, but in some cases you can't vote for some things and not others. So for example, you could vote for people to walk on the roads but not give the cafes extra room on the footpath. You'd really be unwise to vote to give the cafes extra room on the footpath and not to let people walk on the road, because then you will not have enough footpath room.
Yeah, because it's just that it's saying if we went ahead and, voted for this motion to go forward, that one of the disadvantages of it does the exact opposite to what we were hoping it would actually do.
Well, it reduces footpath space, but it means you have to take up road space. So you've got places for people to walk, but it isn't on the footpath itself, which is built
right.
for that purpose.
Okay, thank you. And of course, if we didn't do this, people would be able to walk on the footpath. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yes.
But they may or may not be able to do 2 metre social distancing.
Okay. So where it says this under this, I don't know whether it's called a legislation or what we call it, but bylaw maybe. It says this could continue for up to 12 months. Who decides whether that continues or not, and how do you determine whether it's still whether there is safety issues?
Yeah, that's a really good question. None of us know how long level 2 is going to last, and none of us know how quickly people are going to resume shopping. I mean, what some retailers have made it clear is that they're really keen that people resume in-person shopping, because the longer people only shop online, the more likely they are to continue permanently to shop online, and that completely changes the streetscape and changes for some of them their viability. And so shopping collectively in a group of shops is what they want people to return to reasonably quickly. So a lot of this depends on just how quickly people do return, and what the government's rules are around level 2 and whether they change in time. And none of us can predict that, unfortunately. In terms of who makes the decision, you do, and we would come back to you at some point of your choosing. Basically, at any point in time at all, this can be revisited. So one of the joys of not having of it being a relatively low-tech change, if you like, is that in the same way as we're able to put it in place over about a day and a half, we can also take it away in about a day and a half. It's a little longer, particularly while we've got paint on the road, because they have to be water blasted off rather than decals, for example. But it can be taken away. So at any point in time, the council can say, listen, we don't think that this is working, we don't think this is having the desired impact, and we would like you to take it away.
If this is solely a safety concern, is there any reason why we're not doing Mosgiel and South Dunedin?
We did discuss doing Mosgiel and South Dunedin actually, and if you want to move a motion for us to do those, we could. Trying to do it is resource intensive to roll it out. The main thing is you saw the footfall data, so 100,000 people a week on the Golden Centre block of George Street. We don't have numbers anything like that in either South Dunedin or Mosgiel, which means that the 2 metre physical distancing is unlikely to be such an issue. But there were some staff who wanted to look at us also doing this for Mosgiel, for South Dunedin, for Musselburgh Rise, for Roslyn, and all of these ideas did get discussed in that week. And if this does prove to be really good and shoppers say that they like it, we certainly could follow up with that if the retailers out that way wanted us to.
It's just that it seems, like if we are really concerned for the safety.
Question, please, Councillor.
The question is there a concern that some people might think that the other areas aren't as safe now?
Yeah, I worry about that as well. But the lower numbers mean the safety, the 2 metre distancing is unlikely to be nearly as big an issue. The lower numbers of pedestrians.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, okay, thank you very much.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got about 6 questions, so I'll try to get through them quickly.
That's
so the
fine.
CEO to start with, is effectively a health and safety issue, is it not?
It is, but not one we have a legal obligation to take care of.
Yep. Businesses started operating yesterday at level 2, is that correct?
Yes.
And has anybody had a quick walk down George Street to see how it's going?
Yes, I have 3 times.
And what's the...
apart from the queue outside the barbers, which was kind of noticeable to everybody, I was surprised that there were a fair few people around. I nearly got run over the first time because I walked across the road and I forgot that I had to give way. And, you just realise how quickly you get into the habit of not noticing that there are cars on the road, actually. And a number of the staff, because we're in the building again today and we're here yesterday, a number of people commented they were surprised there were more people in town than they thought there was going to be.
And how are they doing with social distancing at the moment?
Yeah, mostly I think it looks okay. I mean, I've actually been really concerned from my place. I can see the St Clair Esplanade, and I struggle to believe that good social distancing is happening there, or that people are struggling to stay apart in areas where there are a lot of people. It's a very hard thing to make yourself do without constant reminders, actually, which is kind of part of the point of this too, is these constant visual reminders, and that it is not business as usual, that we're in a changed environment.
Great. And now I've got specific questions around the report. I acknowledge that, as has been traversed already, that you didn't have much time to put this together. Point 20 is to the consideration to those who are visually impaired or use mobility devices. Has there been any consultation with any of those groups, especially about the implication of liberalising the use of the footpath?
No,
I don't know who's going to answer that.
No specific consultation, Councillor. Just knowing that they need a clearway, so we're recommending a minimum of 2.5 metre clearway, and if Council adopts the commercial use of footpaths Liberal policy, then we've prepared some guidance for shops on how they can keep that clearway.
And that's covered further down, I think, on point 36. Back to point 17 with the temporary changes to speed limits, but I noticed you said, Mr. Drew, that you're going to be changing the permanent speed signs, not putting temporary signs in because of some way that the emergency vehicles handle that. Is that correct?
That's correct. We'll probably have to put some temporary ones in if Council wish for the weekend, and then we'd look to change out the other ones after the weekend.
Okay, my perspective is from the design perspective. Where will the temporary signs be placed?
Just at the entrance points to blocks. I'm not sure of the details. We'd have to go and walk out there, but we would do it within the traffic management code of practice and with the remit to not take away any parks.
Yeah, so they'll be put in such a way that they would not impinge vehicles getting in and out of car parks, but be visible to cars driving by.
Well, that's what I would have to do, but I don't have the details. I couldn't guarantee anything without going out there and stepping it out and having the code of practice beside me.
Because would you agree that might be a bit of a challenge to make it visible to cars going by if it's not between the parked cars and the road?
Yeah, absolutely. It will be a challenge.
Very good. Point 25.
Just a quick note, Councillor O'Malley,
Yep.
that is part of the reason.
Oh, you just muted yourself.
Oops, thank you.
That's right.
That's part of the reason why the team came up with the idea of putting the dots and the markings all over the road. So they won't be speed signs, but they will be cars and people and cycles, the kind of stencils we already have, and many of them. So the roadway visually looks very different. So it's not a speed sign, but it's an added reminder.
Yeah, I'm just conscious we're in question, so I'm not going to get into the discussion too much. But basically, my concern in the discussion that will be raised will be how it gets laid out at the end and whether or not we get the outcomes we're looking for because of the requirements of the traffic management plans.
At the end, it'll just be all of the existing speed signs through the city will have 10Ks instead of 30Ks if council.
And then the other ones will be lifted up.
Yes, and the other ones would go.
Okay.
So we don't want the temporary ones there. And it's just a day's work or day or a couple of to change them all over.
Okay. So in the end, they'll be gone and then they'll be back up on the thing. So there won't be any sitting around at ground level. Good. Thank you. Question 31 is probably, to me, the crux of the whole thing is the car parks. And it says that staff will monitor and review. And it's the issue around the cars creating a physical barrier between the footpath and the slow speed zone and whether there's a conflict. What will happen if a conflict is observed?
It's more to do with the speed and if people are obeying the speed limit. And so I guess some of the flexibility staff would like is to put in speed bumps if there is, people are still travelling at 30 kilometres an hour and creating a conflict risk.
But there would never be. Now, I'm actually not all that in favour of keeping the car park. So this is my question. Why would you? So is it that there would be no intention that if the conflict was due to the parked cars, that the parked cars would be the resolution and you would get rid of the car park? You're saying that the conflict resolution would come to putting in speed humps to basically allow a person that if they did get hit, they wouldn't get injured.
There's a few things we could do: pedestrian crossings, raise platform crossings, and draw people's attention to defined crossing points. But as the CE said before, the removing car parks was taking off the table. So staff have worked around those.
That's it.
Yeah, I'll address that in my little speech.
The AA man said yesterday he would rather we had removed the car parks, which came as a surprise to all of us, frankly, and the number of people that got in touch afterwards to say that was a surprise too. So, so we haven't included it. There's nothing to stop you adding a resolution that gives us the authority to remove car parking if it's deemed necessary for safety reasons, but we didn't put that in the resolutions.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I will or not move an amendment there or not. Now to the question of point 36, the road corridor width and then the width of the existing footpaths. Would that mean that at the moment, provided businesses do not put stuff out on the footpath, the existing width of the footpath is sufficient?
We did a measurement of people crossing, with a person walking in each direction. In a number of parts of town, it is very difficult to do that with 2 meters. You do end up being in single file, and the minute you have a couple of people walking together, it becomes impossible to do the 2 meter distancing. Okay,
so even with the existing footprint, then if people are coming at opposite directions to each other, or one wants to overtake somebody, if we leave the cars in the car park, the only way they're going to be able to do that is then to traverse past the cars and out onto the road in order to pass each other.
That's right. So the sequence of thinking is not so much, hey, we could give the cafes more space, but we'd have to make people walk on the road. It's there's not enough space, but people could walk on the road. So then we could give the cafes a bit of extra space for their tables. That's the way round the thinking is. Yeah.
But you would acknowledge that by leaving the car parks in and the cars parked in those car parks, we're now basically saying that as soon as you leave the footpath zone, you're going straight out onto the road zone.
Absolutely right.
Even though the whole thing's the road nowadays by NCTS.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, it sort of is. The cars aren't allowed on the footpath, just the people are allowed on the road.
I know, but you do understand. Anyway, I won't, this meeting's going to go long enough that we don't need to discuss that. I think that's it for me. So I guess what I'm sort of asking in the question session is, when we considered leaving the car parks in, and if you look at, say, the diagram that's on, I think, attachment C, where it's clear that the coned area is basically the footpath and the car park. We went past that entirely in our design phase and said, let's leave the car parks in.
Yes, and to be clear, that was absolutely on my instruction. So that wasn't an attempt to try and get some unanimity around this table and to bring people on board who I knew otherwise would, simply because we lost a car park, would reject it out of hand. So that was absolutely on my instruction. Try and do this and not affect the car parking, because we don't want to antagonise the retailers or you.
Okay.
I don't mean you personally, I mean council.
But remembering that this is a health and safety document in front of us rather than an urban design document in front
Absolutely
of us.
right, yeah.
And
so health and
I'll
safety and
reserve
kind
this
of
now to
economic development, if you like. Health and safety and economic development, trying to balance the two.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Mayor Hawkins.
That is a very good question. Yes. It's about and I don't want to get bogged down into detail in particular, just thinking about how the temporary speed bumps might work, and are they designed in such a way that cyclists can easily go around or through them, or are they kind of all the way across the road, which means you have to go over the top of them?
At the moment, the proposal is just the plastic ones that you might be familiar with, just on half side of the road. So we'd propose to put some pedestrian crossings in mid-block, or where there isn't some already, with a plastic speed bump on the side of the road that the cars cross the pedestrian crossing, just to force them to slow. And then that'll draw, instead of people stepping out between cars, that'll hopefully draw people to defined crossing points.
But if you're on a bike, can you get around it without leaving your lane?
Potentially, if you get close enough to the curb, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervis.
Regarding the decals, are we going for decals or paint? And if we're going for decals, have the decals already been purchased?
No, the decals haven't been purchased. They've been they're being mocked up.
Because unlike street signs, they don't have an alternative use, so we haven't ordered those yet.
And the temporary speed bumps, have they been purchased?
No.
Okay. It's been said that that level 2 could last some time. Do we have an indication of the total anticipated cost of this proposal, including the surveys, if level 2 does last some time and we do have to purchase speed bumps and decals and everything else? Do we have an indication, just a rough indication of total cost?
I think that's in the report, councillor. There's a couple of tables outlining cost in the report.
Yeah, so what we're asking for today is to spend up to $40,000 to implement. Of which we will apply to the Innovating Streets Fund, and if we're successful, DCC would have to pay 10% of that.
So does that $40,000 cover the total cost of this proposal that we are to vote on, including surveys, speed bumps, decals yet to be purchased, etc.?
There's no amount of money in there for surveys.
This morning, so she wants to stay and vote, but she's
Councillor.
What's that? Sorry, I'm with Councillor Benson Pope. What was that?
Can you mute? Can you mute, please?
Mute who?
Yourself. So there's no cost in there for surveys. The surveys we've been doing in-house. So there's not an hourly staff cost quoted in. There will be some cost that's not quoted in here for example, for members of the economic development team to be visiting and talking with retailers constantly through this, but to be fair, they'd probably be doing that anyway.
Okay, so we're talking roughly $40,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I have a point of order for the chair, Councillor Benson Pope. I believe that you've been disrespectful to Councillor Wiley in saying that his questions sound like a quiz show, quote, and quote, that you said that you have had about 20 questions, unquote, which is untrue. I would ask that you apologise to Councillor Wiley for being disrespectful.
Thank you, Councillor. I certainly had no intention of being disrespectful to Councillor Wiley, who did have a very large number of questions. When I said 20 questions sounded like a quiz show, I was talking about what I'd said, not what Councillor Wiley was saying. So I hope no offence was intended. I certainly hope none was taken. Thank you.
Thank you for the apology.
Well, I think I just apologised. Councillor Barker.
Answered before. I just wondered how wide our footpaths are on George Street.
3.5 to 4 metres.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
With putting extra pedestrian crossings in the curb and channel, and as we have over the 12-month period, we are likely to have some heavy rainstorms. Have we looked into these obstructions in the waterway, and how are you going to address them? Because we know we have had flooding in the shops in the past, and if we've got obstructions in the watercourse, is it going to cause flooding in the shops?
Sorry, what obstructions, Councillor Hall?
You're going to put ramps on the curb and channel for the pedestrians.
They don't completely block the gutterway.
Yeah, but is it going to be big enough to take the flow of water if we have a big storm?
Yeah, I take your point, Councillor. We haven't got into the detail of the ramps and the primary implementation. We changed the speed signs, paid some decals, and then we'll work through the detail of the accessibility ramps in time.
But we'll certainly make sure that they don't obstruct the watercourse.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Chair. If, with this, we have a serious health concern, I'm just wondering why the government didn't, realise this was a risk and ask councils to, to act this way. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me when the government has been so proactive and led the way on this initiative and knocking out COVID. Surely, if they had any concerns about this, they would have mentioned it and acted on this. Why do you think they haven't?
Well, I think they exactly have by putting in place the accessible streets funding and offering to pay 90% of this kind of work. So this is exactly what that is for. And to be fair, if you go onto kind of social media and online and have a look, activities like this are being either planned or implemented all around the world. So many hundreds and hundreds of cities are doing things like this at the moment. To some, a number are physically building, taking away the car parks and doubling the width of their footpaths and physically building new footpaths. I mean, there's a lot of pictures online about what they're doing in Auckland, for example, cones out to allow permanent cycleway, changing to shared spaces. I mean, various forms of activity like this are happening in hundreds of places, including throughout New Zealand. And this is why the government's put this accessible streets funding in place is to help pay for some of those changes.
But surely if they had serious concerns because they've been so rigorous so far, why would they not make it law?
You mean make it law for us to keep people apart, 2 metres apart in a public space?
No, I mean, say, you know, the council's legally had to act on this, you know, rather than just leave it as a thing that you could or couldn't do.
Well, Councillor, I don't think it's fair to ask the Chief Executive to tell us why government hasn't done something, and she has answered your question. Have you got another one?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Just going back to something the CEO said earlier, she used the number of 100,000 movements per week past Golden Centre. And I'm trying to work out where that data came from.
Yeah, so we sent you a report from Nathan Bird, and so the figures in there show entry into certain shops, but there's also a footfall count. I can't remember the exact wording. It's for January, February, March, and it shows 1.16 million people over that 3-month period, which equates to approximately 100,000 people a week over a 12-week period. So considerably more. I mean, everybody that I've asked, give me a guess as to what those numbers are. On average, people say 5,000, 10,000, but the actual footfall counts were considerably higher in that one space, that one part of town. So that's as opposed to numbers just going into an individual shop, which make it very hard to predict what that actually means for people in the whole space.
So when we look at the table 2 that he presented to us with the mean daily averages across by month. So for example, in May, the CBD 1 was 949, was the highest, and the next highest was CBD 4.
That's one shop, right? So that's one shop. If you go to page 3,
yes,
the second paragraph, it says an annual trend predicted count, blah, 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 using trend line. The total entry count into one particular area for that 3-month period was 1,156,271 pedestrian count over. So that's about 100,000 people a week in that 3-month period. But again, to be fair, that is a January, February, March, which is likely to be different to a May, June, July, and also likely to be different to post-COVID, and we don't know what those numbers are going to be in terms of people coming back.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to get at, because I'm looking at the CBD averages.
But they're each one of those is people going into a specific shop. So if you look at paragraph 3, that's pedestrians in general, and paragraph 3 says January, February, March, January to March 2020 entry count of 1,115. I mean, that's the adjusted number. So again, it's slightly under 100,000 a week.
I'd like to, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 questions back to Mr. Drew again that sort of came up upon his mention of pedestrian crossings. Are we doing consistent messaging to the pedestrians on how they plan to use the area? Because pedestrian crossings are traditionally put in place where you have cars dominating the road and safe places for pedestrians to cross. And therefore, my question is, if you're putting them in, what signalling are we giving to the pedestrians on how to use the road space?
Good question.
Yeah, good question. So predominantly the signalling is the decals, which is the visual cue.
Well, not so much about how will they find it, but what I'm saying is if you put one in, you're saying you cross here safely. The implication being that the other places are less safe.
Yeah, agreed. So the pedestrian crossing point is also a point where we could put in a speed bump. So if people are not following the 10 km/h speed limit, there's a way to force that slowing point. So it's more about creating a point where we can force traffic to slow, because there is a point where they may have to stop and go over a pedestrian. That's more the the reason for them than actually the need for them.
I'm sure they won't go over a pedestrian, but I know what you mean. The speed bumps, actually, Goy, you brought that up, and I sort of want to follow on to His Worship's question, and I think you started to answer it. Are they going to go in at the start, or are they going to go in only if people are not observing the speed? Because there is a difference there. If people will go down to 10, do we need them? And then the other one is, how will the cyclists go around it if they get near the curb, unless they obviously finish near the curb? So are they only going to go in places where there are no car parks?
Yes, yep, they'll only go where there are no car parks.
So there's sufficient of those around.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay. But what about the question of, are they going in right away, or are they going to go in only if we see?
Yeah, I guess
not.
Up for council to decide, but staff would recommend that some kind of traffic calming is implemented, just to ensure that speeds are slow, and then we reduce the risk of mode conflict. And there's lots of evidence around that. The slower a vehicle goes, the less a chance of harm there is. And
there's no doubt about that.
While things are new, it takes time for people to change embedded behaviours.
Except the car in front of them going 10 kilometres an hour. I mean, the traffic should be slowed down. I guess my question really is, I believe that this will be the most contentious thing we'll do other than the general plan. And is it going to be really necessary, because you've taken the traffic down to such a low speed, that will they really need to also be forced to go over these speed bumps? And I guess along the same lines, what role are the police going to play here, given that they are the enforcement agent?
Yes, so there's been preliminary discussions with the police. I think the CE's had those, so we would hope there is a higher police presence at the start. We don't have to put the speed bumps in, and ask for flexibility from council to put them in if speeds aren't being speed limits aren't being followed.
I guess I'd be more comfortable with that if that was sort of the approach that we're taking.
We'll have the opportunity.
But I know that's a speech. I know it's not a question. But thank you very much. I'm done.
Thank you, Mayor Hawkins.
Only to reiterate my desire to move the motion that was circulated in due course.
Okay, we've still got a couple of questions. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, the CEO was talking about 100,000 foot traffic in the main street area. What percentage of them would be tourists in the January, February, March count?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What was that?
I've got no idea. I mean, obviously they don't stop people and ask them, are you a tourist? No. So they just do a pedestrian count. So this is the best data we've got. This kind of data, you know, it's not. We don't have a huge amount of it. This is as good as we've got.
Yeah, I understand that. But what I'm saying, in January, February, and March, we had a very, very large percentage of tourists in the city at that point. So you know, at this point, I can't see anywhere near 100,000 being in the street.
No, neither can I.
Yeah.
This is an estimate of those months, and as I said, January, February, March is very different to May, June, July, and very different again post-COVID. So
that's right. That's what I'm saying. So the
percentage. But if level 2 goes for 12 months, then we will have another January, February, March, although without cruise buses, cruise ships. But we will start to have other kind of tourists. I mean, we're about to roll out a fairly extensive marketing campaign to try and encourage people to come to Dunedin. If we don't think they come, that's money that's wasted. So
yeah, no, I haven't got a problem with that, but I was just pointing out that count was done over a high tourist season.
Yeah, I think I did point that out. Yeah,
thank you. That seems to be the questions exhausted. I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute adjournment so people can get themselves a cup of something if they want, seconded by Councillor Walker. An adjournment until 20 to 11, and then we'll come back to the motion that the Mayor has foreshadowed by email yesterday and a moment ago. Those in favour of adjourning for 5 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
That's agreed. Against no. That's agreed. We're adjourned until 10:40. Thank you very much. some more tourist information. It might be useful, the pedestrian count information. It might be useful if people are happy with that, if she just updates us on what was just given to her. Is that all right? Okay, Dr. Bidrose.
So a couple of bits of information following from Councillor Hall. So the survey that Nathan Berg gave us, which was the average of 100,000 people a day, was actually done on one of the side streets leading into George Street. So these numbers are a bit different. This is our own pedestrian count that we did for the George Street project. So you're going to get some of this information shortly for analysing the George Street project. Unfortunately, it is again January, February, March, so it is only indicative, but actually it shows 70,000 people per day on George Street. 70,000 per day, not 100,000 a week. And of those, 20% are tourists. So 80% of that number are Dunedin people. And one more quick thing, Councillor Houlihan asked about the funding. So there are actually two funds. The Improving Streets or Innovating Streets has to be for things that are trialling out things you want to make permanent. We probably won't get money for this work out of that fund. However, there is another fund specifically for COVID-related changes like this that councils want to make. So the government has made money available just for temporary COVID changes, and we think we will get it funded out of that fund.
Right, that's very helpful. So would you mind in due course getting that information circulated to everyone, please?
It will all come out as part of the George Street work in the next day or two to you all.
Thank you very much. Good. Okay, so we'll go to you, Your Worship. And do you want me to get the GSOs to put that motion you foreshadowed up on the screen?
Not just yet. I've got a question for the Chief Executive just based on that last funding discussion. Are all of, just because Innovating Streets is specifically mentioned in the motion, would that be, are all the available funds through NZTA, for example, and would that be a more enabling, rather than limit it, because as it's written, it limits the funding to something that looks less likely?
Maybe if it just said government, that would be good, and then we could go anywhere that we were most likely to get a return.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Lynn, could you put the motion up, please, and the Mayor can speak to it.
Change it. Mr. Chair, do you have a seconder? I'm happy to second.
Oh, I will when he moves, or when he, if and when it's moved, I'll ask for a seconder. All right, everyone should be able to see that now.
Yeah, so the what I'm suggesting as changes to this are in G, where for that to read, ask staff to progress an application for government funding to contribute to any costs incurred. Also, just picking up on some of the questions that Councillor O'Malley raised, I'd suggest adding a clause I that delegates to staff the ability to implement the work in the most effective and cost-effective way, which is to say we're approving a range of things that can be used. Some may prove more necessary than others, and rather than us trying to work through what that rollout might look like, leave it to staff to do as and when is necessary. So if that could be added.
Can you just repeat that slowly, please, so the staff can grab it?
Sorry. Delegates, it will be, delegates to staff the ability to implement the work in the most effective and cost-effective way.
That's good. Okay, so with that amendment, that addition, you're moving this now?
I am.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I will second it, thank you.
Councillor Garrow is seconding. All right, the Mayor, speaking to your motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important from the outset to think about what it is that we are doing here. And that is, we're asking people who need to drive down George Street to do that a bit slower, or to use an alternative route if that proves too inefficient. We're letting people continue to park for free in the city centre, and we're letting retailers and businesses use more of the outdoor footprint to support them in this situation. I don't think these proposals are radical at the best of times, let alone in a global pandemic situation that we currently find ourselves in. It's also important to note, I think, what we are not doing. What we are not proposing is stripping car parking out of the main street, and we are not proposing changing the speed limit for a fixed term of 12 months. So that's what we are doing and what we're not doing. But mostly what's important to me is why we are doing this. And as liberating as alert level 2 may feel relative to the past 7 or 8 weeks or 9 weeks for some of us, this is not a return to normal. Yes, businesses can reopen. Yes, customers can return, but not as normal. We still need to maintain our vigilance because we haven't beaten this thing as great as the achievements have been at a national level in the public health realm. And so it's important that we do what we can to try and keep workers and residents safe and stay on top of this. And staying safe at the moment in alert level 2 means keeping a distance of 2 meters from strangers outdoors and a distance of 1 meter inside. And with a narrow footpath, it's hard to make that work, I think. There are a range of solutions that are available to us. We could have, as the AA suggested we should have, taken all the car parking out and let people use that space. We could somehow try and limit the number of people in the city centre, or we could do this, which is slowing traffic that needs to use George Street to a degree that pedestrians feel comfortable and safe, pedestrians and other road users feel comfortable and safe also sharing it. And the evidence tells us that to get to that point requires you to take the speed limit down to 10 kilometres an hour. There's been a significant amount of public debate about this, as you would expect, and I think the response to the proposal was entirely predictable. And we saw that at the public forum yesterday. We had retailers turn up and tell us it's the worst idea in the world, and retailers turn up and tell us that they were supportive. We had advocacy groups from the community turn up and tell us it was the end of the world, and advocacy groups from the community turn up and tell us that it was a great thing to be doing. And I don't think, and yes, obviously, business and retailers are crucial in the city centre, but they are not the only consideration. And I think Mr. Thompson's point yesterday at the public forum was well made in terms of who represents and who looks after the interests of the customers. In a perfect world, we could have engaged more thoroughly around this, and there's been a lot of discussion about the adequacy, if you like, of the consultation around this, but this isn't a perfect world. We're operating within a global health emergency. And to be frank, history would suggest that you could spend as much time as you like engaging with people and consulting on something that changes how the city centre operates, but you would still end up in exactly the same position as you find yourself at the start, with a roughly divided population, whether they are pedestrians or retailers or what have you. I can't see how that would be resolved if we'd taken longer to get to the same point. And just finally, none of what is being suggested here is permanent. All of this stuff is easily reversible and can be refined as needed. And I think it's important to include the clause there that makes that explicit, that staff will liaise with stakeholders and residents and business owners on the way through to refine things as and when issues may arise, because you can't predict every outcome. And so, it can be refined as necessary should unforeseen issues come out of this. And I think Councillor O'Malley's points were well made around, which of these things are necessary from the beginning and how you phase that and time those things. And so that was sort of the intention behind the additional clause delegating staff, the flexibility to use things as and when they become necessary, as opposed to deploying the full arsenal from the beginning. So That's it from me, aside from to say and to ask colleagues to consider what the worst case scenarios are of us doing this versus what the worst case scenarios are of us not doing this. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a COVID-19 response, and I want to thank staff for the work on the report and the ideas and the potential work into the night this evening if Council chooses to pass this motion. I want to thank colleagues for making the time to get here, including Councillor Elder, Councillor Staines and myself. Some of us have moved heaven and earth. We might not have articulated it. One of our colleagues said, what is the critical issue here? It's the health and the lives of our citizens. And we might not have a legal obligation, but we sure as hell have a moral obligation. We have a moral obligation to protect our citizens in terms of physical distancing and support them in that. And remember our poor safety record when it comes to pedestrians. As we met yesterday, I got an email from my bank talking about queuing, and this will be repeated many times over. We have had a message from the community through the annual plan hearings that people are fearful and need reassurance to return. And personally, level 2 feels a whole lot more riskier, particularly for those who are health compromised. And many want to return to shop and to support our local businesses, but they are fearful. Make no mistake about the transmission of COVID-19. You only have to read today's ODT article about how it lingers and have read some of the science around this. And the question has been raised, well, shouldn't we trust our public? Quite frankly, some of the things I've seen over the past weeks of lockdown, that not everyone is on board with this. Businesses are going to need to do things differently, and yes, it's a very difficult time for them. They'll be dealing with physical distancing inside and new ways to attract customers. But we need to work on the outside. If ever there was a time to work together for the good of our citizens, it's sure as heck now, to manage the physical distancing and to support the businesses for the community to feel confident about coming back to the city. If you are tempted to vote against this motion, how will you feel if community transmission occurs and we've not put anything in place and done our best? And we need to be swift. I urge you to vote in support of the motion to protect the citizens of this city. For all of their loved ones and for all of our loved ones, we need to do the very best we can. Make no mistake about it. This is about people's lives. Please, please vote yes.
Thank you. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Chair. What hasn't been mentioned in all of this is the businesses, that we are making a decision today with little engagement with them about how their livelihoods will be affected. Most of them have been closed for 5 to 6 to 7 weeks, some of them, and they are desperate. Many of them are on the edge. They haven't had any money coming in, and now we're making proposals that are going to be closing the city down around the centre to a 10-kilometre speed limit. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm put off going into town with that. I'm also concerned about accidentally hitting people if they've got to divert from the footpath through a car park onto the road. I see serious concerns for pedestrian safety with this proposal. Now, we have heard about safety. I went into lockdown 2 weeks earlier than most people. I have an immune compromised son. I would never do anything to put people at risk. And if I thought that was the case, I would vote against this now. I don't believe that the government that has been proactive and really aggressive on trying to eliminate COVID-19 would allow people to walk on footpaths if there was a risk. Now, I know when I go out, I walk along quickly and I move to where I'm going. I often wear a mask, I wear gloves. I just think that we have to look at the whole picture. If we put this into action and vote it now, we could see businesses closing left, right and centre. As it is, they may still close, but we need to give them some hope. Businesses are trying to open their doors. They do not need the stress. It is not fair on us to put it on them. And I know that the council has good intentions, but we need to look at what the implications of this will be.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. As council, the vision is for a great small city. Our economic development strategy's vision includes business vitality as one of its themes, also a compelling destination with a revitalised city centre. We all want the same thing: to get on with our lives in the city we love, to revitalise ourselves, to support our local businesses, and to keep ourselves and others safe during level 2. I've been torn on the effects of the proposals in front of us today. As an employee of a severely impacted sector, I feel the pain and anxiety of businesses reopening in an uncertain world. As a consumer, I feel the excitement of being able to access our shops again and stock up on the necessities and pleasures of life, like a couple with friends. As a person with no spleen and 1 kidney, daughter of an older citizen, I feel the fear of COVID-19 transmission in a public area. As a car driver with a busy life, I feel empathy with those juggling their demanding lives, while as a pedestrian, I want to work safely through the city. As a mother of a teenager who gathers in a gaggle, I want to keep her safe from unnecessary contacts. As a councillor, I want to help do the right thing by our citizens and keep them safe, plus help jumpstart our economy. The key thing that I'm thinking about here is he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is people, it is people, it is people. The key to me is to keeping people safe and confident to come back to the CBD and pump life back into our economy. I think these range of measures are sensible and worth trialling, so I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yep, thank you very much. And reiterate what Councillor Gary said in thanking staff for the report. And I also want to give thanks to His Worship for a clear and well thought out motion, which I will be supporting. So let's be clear from the get-go that staff are simply responding to the request made and voted on by this council at its May 4th meeting. Let's also be clear that what lies at the heart of this, and the words that resonate throughout the report, is support for local businesses and public safety. I am disappointed to see this debate on short-term measures to give a leg up to local businesses that have been doing it tough during COVID-19 get taken over by issues completely unrelated to the purpose of the paper. There is no ideological drive, excusing the unintended pun, towards a car-free city centre as suggested by Councillor Radich in Wednesday's ODT in this proposal. The suggestion is just ridiculous, not to mention insulting towards our hardworking staff whose only focus, as directed by us, is to try and help business while allowing for physical distancing as recommended by the government. I've publicly stated that I see great merit in many parts of the proposal, as the primary focus is on trying as best as we can under imperfect circumstances to help local business who have suffered due to the extended lockdown. If the council decided to do nothing to help local business, we'd be roundly critiqued for inertia. Like it or not, people will be reticent to come back into town, as there will be lots of a residual fear around COVID-19. We've heard that from many of our councillors. It also includes me, who, like Councillor Barker, I also only have 1 kidney. So anything we can do to alleviate those fears has to be welcomed. There is always the potential for reservations around any proposal, and often the pros and cons of anything we do or initiate don't become apparent until they are put in place. That's how we progress, or otherwise. Potentially, things have been missed. If they become apparent, hopefully they can be added or altered. Staff have been doing a fantastic job under extremely difficult circumstances, but this report, as I've mentioned, makes it very clear that the primary focus is about supporting local businesses in the best way we can. And finally, around the questions relating to consultation. As the Mayor has stated, this is not a perfect world. Consultation has been as best as it could have been, given the extraordinary circumstances under which we and staff have been forced to work. Dunedinites should be very proud of the way the DCC has conducted its operations under the COVID-19 crisis. As I stated at the beginning, I will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor van der Vis.
The claimed purpose is safety, and yet it's a 10-kilometre experiment, which in some cases is going to force people off the pavement because of the few expanded businesses that may expand onto the pavement, through cars and into the carriageway. And the justification for the 10-kilometre/hour limit is that the carriageway, the vehicle part of the road, is now going to be a pedestrian shared zone. If you look at the ideology that goes way back now, which most of the public are well aware of, regarding pedestrianising George Street and getting rid of cars and parking and having pedestrians and cycleways predominate, especially in some blocks, you will see that this experiment very well accords with that ideology. That ideology has had a number of ways in which it has been pushed over the years, and the public of Dunedin have been quite aware of them. The first of them was the cycleways, the need for cycleways to reduce parking and make things more difficult for cars. The next issue was the supposed drainage issue, the need to dig up George Street, and that as an excuse to create a pedestrian zone through George Street. And now we see footpath distancing as the excuse for this new $40,000 10-kilometre experiment. The footpath distancing is actually going to be made worse by one or two businesses that may want to extend onto the footpath under this proposal. I don't believe that at least 90% of the business will even contemplate doing that. And of the remaining 10% that might contemplate it, I believe very few actually will. So all this proposal is based on businesses supposedly moving out onto the pavement, a pavement which is currently 3.5 to 4 metres wide, and forcing the people wanting to keep distancing out onto the road. As someone who has nearly clipped a number of pedestrians walking out onto the road along Highgate, for instance, where they were trying to avoid getting in the path of pedestrians coming the other way, I see the real health and safety issue here as being created by an experiment that hasn't been thought through, and an experiment that will simply add to the poor safety record that we have, that Councillor Gary has already referred to, and that I've repeatedly pointed out is fundamentally because we have a demographic of very young and very old people, and it's these reasons that we have this poor safety record. Otherwise, I don't believe Dunedin has a particularly poor safety record given its demographic. So spending $40,000, $10,000 of which seems already to have been spent on 10-kilometre signs, which I've never seen in a roadworks and I don't believe will ever be used again. I think there's been actually a significant amount of pushing this through in advance and spending money in advance of us making this decision. It seems to me like something of a retrospective rubber stamping, as we've been doing for so many submissions lately.
Point of order,
where we have been asked.
Point of order.
I was prepared to give the councillor some latitude, but the inference that somehow the conduct of staff has been improper in advance of this meeting, I don't think is fair.
I think that's fair. I'll uphold that. Councillor, could you just withdraw that, please? This
Yeah,
report,
I'll withdraw.
excuse me, can I finish, please? This report was generated, in fact, at the request of council, and so I don't think your comments are fair.
I withdraw any suggestion that staff have done anything improper.
Thank you. Carry on, you've got another 35 seconds.
Oh, thank you for letting me know. In terms of how we go forward from now, I believe we should vote against this experiment, and I foreshadow that if this motion fails, that we go to the status quo, which will cost us nothing, which will not be an experiment with dangers of its own, and which will not be upsetting to the majority of the retailers in George Street. So my foreshadowed motion is option 2 for the status quo. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stones.
Thank you, Chair. It's my intention to support the resolutions. In doing this, I recognise that there will be some people who find them unpalatable. But I guess with a very limited survey, 50% for, 50% against, and probably the same in our community, we have to start to look at why we would see these resolutions as important. Currently, our footpaths will not allow the 2 metre distancing. We've heard that. We've heard that there are 70,000 people going through that area every day. So we are, in a way, required to make the area safe. It will impact on the attractiveness of George Street for some people, but I think for the majority of the public, they will see that we have an environment in which they can remain safe. Anything that increases the risk of another outbreak in Dunedin, I can't support. An outbreak could result in the city or its region being put back into lockdown. So $40,000 spent now would be cheap. If we go back into lockdown, businesses will have significant financial damage yet again. So at the end of the day, this action is intended to encourage people back into our CBD by making it a safer place. And I, for one, believe that that is the right thing to do. So I will be supporting these resolutions.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. You know, I think we can all agree the concerns about our residents, their safety, their health. That is the overarching of what we are all debating here. And we're all looking at this in the sense of saying, what is in the best interest of the CBD? How can we get people getting back and moving comfortably through the CBD? Really, that is the crux of it. And when I look at the motion that we've got in front of us, it doesn't even talk about the business community in the CBD. It really talks about the pedestrians in the CBD. What it does talk about is basically enforcing a speed limit and creating barriers, in my opinion. We will want to have a motion where we would see people moving about the CBD, going back to their lives as much as they can to get involved and actually spend money and interact with everybody. Yes, there's 2 metre distancing, but there has been no cases shown where there's been transmission through walking in the street. The retailers are doing everything they can, and that's about the public health and public safety. When we go back and have a look at this, let's look at this in CBD. It's not George Street, it's the CBD. We're looking Lower Stewart Street. We're talking the Octagon. We're talking through to Princess Street. But yet we haven't talked about the bus hub. That's not included here. And I would have thought there was other issues around the city that we could see where there is greater congestion. But the other thing is, we're trying to make a decision without information. And we heard that quite clearly yesterday. We heard from Dougal McGowan in the chamber. He said, consult and engage and do it properly. He talked about making it easy for everyone to access George Street. Encourage people back to the CBD. And that's the importance. Encourage people back to the CBD. Generation Zero. Acknowledge better consultation was needed. Richard Thompson, get the research. We have done this on the fly, and that's not a good way to make decisions. The facts are we are going into winter. There's always going to be less people on the street. We're going to be waiting at least another 6 weeks, if not 2 months, for the students to return to the city. That is going to impact a lot more to our economy than whether our residents actually enter George Street or not. How will this change the traffic movements around the whole city centre? We saw that with the Octagon. So there's a lot more to this. But what really concerns me, and this is what we look at, we've talked about the funding mechanism and where it comes from innovating streets funding. And that clearly states it goes to permanency. So don't talk about 90% funding. This is about 100% funding. This is about essentially council taking this all on the chin and actually costing it all out. But I think when we look at the motion, we're really saying to our residents, as I see it, we want to police this. We want to put these barriers in place so we think you're going to be safe. I'm sorry, but I have a greater respect for our residents. They can look after themselves. They have shown themselves to be great people and great leaders upon their own community in making sure that we have had no cases in Dunedin through public transmission. Let's invest in the people. Let's invest and support them and say, we have great faith in what you're doing. But more importantly, let's not put barriers in place of businesses. Let's not cost one more job. Let's not cost one more business failure. Because I'm sorry, for those that have not been in business, this is exactly what it's going to do. You're going to kill some people's lives in the sense of the businesses and the ability for them to trade. And I'm really strong on this, as you can tell. But having been in business and struggled in retail, this is going to make it even harder, in my opinion. Let the community adapt. Let the community go back to as much normality as they can. Let's not put more barriers in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to start my speech with addressing the issue of whether we put all the decisions in the hands of self and we put business ahead of public health. In every country in the world where that argument is won, the COVID-19 outbreak got substantially worse, and all those economies are now in the tank. There is a distinct relationship between establishing a good public health response and the long-term viability of businesses. Only when the public health response has been met first can you turn around and establish a good economy afterwards. And that's how this government has approached it. And this approach fits in line with that our government's position. I want to acknowledge a lot of work has been done by staff over a very short time frame. And that has also meant that there has not been the level of consultation that perhaps you would normally ask for in an approach that the city is taking right now. But there are many issues that have got in the way of that, and I believe the staff have done the best they can. The spend on materials has come up a couple of times. How can you enact something if you wait for the resolution and then say, oh, now I've got to turn around and print signs? It is a requirement, Councillor Vandervis, that staff act responsibly. The CEO also has the authority to spend appropriately. I believe the spend was appropriate, and it would be highly inappropriate to wait on this resolution for a minor spend. Now, this is a minor spend in terms of the whole council spend. I mean, it's ridiculous to put this forward as as profligate spending, as I'm sure the word will be used later. It simply had to get done if it's going to be executed in time. And now we need to consider, as you're going forward with this, what would the negative implications be of going forward with this? Probably the biggest thing that we are doing is changing the speed limit along the main streets down to 10 kilometres an hour. My own personal experience upon going into the centre of town is that I don't actually pick up at the top end and walk and drive all the way down George and Princess Street. I tend to go on parallel streets and then come in for the last block or two of my journey. And in fact, in my case, I almost always head to the Meridian and park there. So I'd be crossing George Street. What we're really asking people is to do maybe a 1 or 2 block section of their journey at 10 kilometres an hour when they used to do it at 30. So a 20 kilometre an hour reduction in a very short part of the total journey total journey. Now, if that is enough to stop you coming to town, then probably your driver that's coming to town wasn't that high in the first place. We haven't removed any car parks, and I actually consider that to be a bit of a design fault, to be honest. I actually think that probably better if we had, but they are there, they're staying there. So what have we done? We've asked you to go slower for a shorter part of your journey. That's basically it. We're not really doing much more else. Now, why are we expecting the pedestrians to potentially be on the road? We are responding to the fact that the government has instructed a distance apart to which we must be. And yes, there are less people in this time of year than there are in the summertime, but we are much, much further apart. In addition to it, respiratory diseases spread much faster and are much worse in the cold season. We are going into winter. We are going into a higher risk environment just on the season alone, which even then says that social distancing will be even more important. We are not suggesting that we want people to start walking all over George Street just for the fun of it. We are acknowledging that basically they will have to be 1 or 2 meters, they have to be 2 meters apart outside the buildings. Now their bubbles are allowed to start to mix a little bit too, so we should expect bigger groups in town. It's going to be very hard for them to pass each other and meet that distance on the narrow footpaths that we have. So they will end up having to leave the footpath. I'm also worried about how this debate has moved forward, and there appears to be a conflation of what we're doing here now and people worried about the long-term changes in George Street. And I think that that's an issue because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to address in this particular item the conflicting interests of maximizing commerce and protecting our public health outcomes. Now, if we just ignored all the distancing rules and let people get in as close as they want and we open up the bars again and everybody does what they want, we will be definitely compromising the outcome of the COVID-19 response. And therefore the government has said we won't be doing that. Level 2 is a restricted business environment. And we are simply putting together a plan that responds to the government's restricted business environment. And I really want to touch on something else which I'm seeing emerging now, and I don't want to touch on it long because it'll conflate. There seems to be an entrenchment starting to come down here when it comes down to what the future of George Street is going to be. Some people are nodding very wisely, and I would say they are the most entrenched I'm thinking of. And if we don't discuss this properly, it's going to be a bad outcome. But I won't stay on that any longer because that's not what we're talking about today. I want to just finish with what really would happen if we don't do anything. People have said, have you not thought about the businesses? I've thought about the businesses, but who shops at those businesses? People. So in the end, you've got to think about the customer first. If you don't think about them first, which is basically the central tenet of business, by the way, if you don't think of them, there is no business for you. So if we don't address the fears of the public coming back into town, then we are not addressing one of the components that affect the business recovery. So in my opinion, we're doing what we can. I like the last addendum to the motion because it allows staff to respond quickly if we find there's something unintended that we've done. But we know that under the spacing rules, it's going to be very hard for people to pass each other on the footpath. We're giving them an opportunity then to go into the road reserve itself. And we're saying if they do that, there's a conflict issue, and we therefore have to make sure there's a safety issue addressed. That is all we are doing here.
Over time,
and for people to say that we are basically trying to bring around pedestrianisation by stealth, they're ignoring the fact that what we're trying to do is address a public health issue the best way we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll be voting yes, obviously.
Thank you. Councillor Lofiso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have much to say except to say I'll be supporting this motion, and I thank the staff. I thank Dr. Bidrose and all the staff for their perseverance and dedication to duty to serve our public, which is not just businesses. And I also thank my colleagues for actually educating me as to what is the job of a politician. And it's not just to serve the people who voted for us. It's we need to serve the whole city, customers and businesses. And we need to be realistic that this is a Band-Aid. We're not actually really dealing with the causes of this whole economic breakdown, because the market, whatever it is, has failed us all globally, and we need to actually change the economic paradigm. So I'll be supporting this motion, and thank you to the staff and movers.
Thank you, councillor. That takes us to the mayor, the mover, for his right of reply.
Too much further, but I've been muted? No.
No, I've unmuted you.
Oh, thank you, very kind. But I can't resist, because the spectre of ideology has been raised. This has been called a part of a wider ideological drive. Well, of course it is. Everything is ideological. Every opinion expressed by every person in this room is a product of ideology, a product of your values and your knowledge and your perspectives and your opinions. That's what that means. There's no such thing as someone operating outside of that in some kind of ideological vacuum. And you know, the inference really is that some opinions are the natural order of things, and some opinions are inherently aberrant. And I think that is unfortunate to reduce an argument down to such simple terms. Councillor Wiley has suggested that we should have confidence in our community to contain this because they've done very well so far. It's pretty easy to have confidence in your community for containing the transmission of a virus when nobody has been allowed to leave the house for other than collecting essential items or walking around the block. Level 2 is a significant shift in the way that people can act and interact socially, and in this case, in the city centre often, but not always, economically, because you know there are reasons for being in the city centre that go beyond exchanging money for goods and services. But again, it's not a, you can dismiss it as a product of ideology. It's also a product of, and this approach is a product of council's existing strategies and policies around, you know, whether it's the Global Streets Design Guide, which we have adopted to guide our urban design work and speaks specifically to making more people-friendly spaces, whether it's the Central City Plan work that we've been doing now. Individual members can disagree with the decisions that council have made previously, but those are the decisions that council have made. Those are our strategies and plans and policies, and it is entirely appropriate for staff to prepare options for us that are in line with the decisions that this body has made. We've been implored to do the research. I mean, I can't swear to you that that any of this will be significant in terms of the bigger picture of things. I mean, if we do nothing and businesses fail, we will be blamed for not trying hard enough. If we do this and businesses fail, this action will be blamed. If people get sick and we do nothing, it will be our fault. If we do this and people don't get sick, the whole thing will have been a waste of time. These kinds of responses are inevitable, but just in closing, I just want to reiterate what I said in opening, that we need to consider, not just in this decision, but in any decision, you know, weigh up what is the worst that could happen if you do this, and what is the worst that could happen if you don't. And I think the latter is a far more terrifying proposition than the former, and welcome the support of councillors for this motion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Worship. We'll take the vote by division. Ms. Adamson, we're in your hands.
Councillor Barker?
Aye.
Councillor Gowrie?
Aye.
Councillor Hall?
Aye.
Mayor Hawkins,
Aye.
Councillor Houlihan. Councillor Houlihan. I'll move on. Councillor Fiso.
Aye.
Councillor Lord. Councillor Lord. We'll try again in a minute. Councillor O'Malley.
Aye.
Councillor Staines.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
No.
Councillor Lord.
No.
Councillor Houlihan.
No.
Councillor Benson Pope.
Aye.
Motion carried 9-4.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the meeting, as all the other items on the agenda were dealt with yesterday. So in thanking you for your patience and time and focus on these issues, I'll wish you a safe and happy day and close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.